Hey everyone, and welcome. This is WIP and Chat Wednesday, and I'm going to be doing a different subject. I decided to do something a little bit different this week. I will be asking a couple of questions, possibly 3, and please don't forget to go ahead and put those down below in the comments to get yourself registered, continually registered, I should say, for these free giveaways. So your first question is going to be, let me know what your favorite time of year is. What makes that time of year special? So we're going to be talking about autism and autism awareness. And there is a big reason why this is important in my life. So I really don't talk a lot about my personal life on YouTube because it's not always the easiest thing to do. In some cases, it's something that I think is helpful so that people can understand more about you as a creator. Autism awareness is really so important, and yet we don't really hear a lot about it. Here's the scoop. I have 2 boys. My youngest son was diagnosed when he was 3, having what they call borderline autism. Now, for me, thought to myself, well, what do you mean by borderline? I mean, like, what do you mean? And the psychologist told me, or actually it wasn't a psychologist, it was the head of the neurologist department at Marybridge Hospital in Tacoma. He basically told me, he says, listen, your son, he shows a lot of signs of being autistic. We could not come up with a conclusive diagnosis. So basically, that's why we're saying it is borderline autism and not, we can't give you a scale. We don't know for sure. Now, as a parent, that kind of left me in somewhat of a turmoil because you're being basically told that your son has characteristics of autism, but not. So for years I just kept thinking, how do you deal with this? What do you do? Do you raise your child differently than others? And because there was actually no concrete proof he was autistic, that left us with no support as far as different groups that are out there, because as I said, there was no concrete proof, and some of these organizations, they want to see those reports. So basically what ultimately happened is my son was put into a Head Start program. So at age 3 he started school, and that was that was horrifying. Now, the reason why I say that is because most autistic children and adults have a hard time when their schedules change. So they're very set in a specific type of schedule, and my son was just, it was just horrible. So basically what happened is he was put into, like I said, a Head Start program to get him started in school, and he started lashing out. Now, his way of lashing out would be hitting you or kicking you, and the majority of the time this would occur when he was trying to explain to you what he wanted. Now, my son at this age could only speak one-word sentences. And as an adult, that's not always easy to try to figure out what they're trying to tell you. But in his mind, in his brain, you should have understood what he said. You know, that's just basically how it works. And if you didn't understand, he would lash out by hitting or kicking. I can't tell you how many daycares that I had to remove him from because he was actually hurting the other kids, or in one case he actually hurt the daycare provider, and I mean, I was so horrified by that. But yeah, what do you do, right? I mean, what do you do for a child like this? And you had absolutely no concrete evidence to support it. As I said, he started Head Start. He would lash out at the teachers because he was frustrated either by them trying to get him to change a project midstream. Other issue would be if he was trying to tell them something and they didn't understand it. So I got a phone call about a week into him being in Head Start, and the school said, listen, we are having an issue here and we need you to take your son into the doctors and have him evaluated for. And I thought, well, why would you want him evaluated for ADHD? He was not hyper. That was his way of expression. And she says, well, he's a risk and we really need help from his family doctor. And I thought, okay. So I called the family doctor, explained to him what was going on, and gave them a list, or a letter I should say, that the teacher had wrote up for the doctor. Took my son in. The doctor said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and put your son on Ritalin. And I said, why would you want to put him on Ritalin? He's not hyperactive. And he says, well, because he is demonstrating hyperactivity at school, we're going to go ahead and put him on Ritalin, and basically that will help him calm down so that he does not lash out. Now, honestly, to me, that is the easy way out. Instead of actually finding the underlying problem, we're going to put a Band-Aid on it and give him Ritalin. I wasn't happy about it, but I thought, well, you know, obviously these people know what they're doing, so I went ahead, picked up the prescription, and the first few days on Ritalin, my son turned into a walking zombie. He was extremely mellow, somewhat lethargic as far as I was concerned, but the school was happy because now they didn't have to deal with his outbursts. After, I think it was the third or fourth day that he was on Ritalin, he would come home from school. The Ritalin, when it started to wear off, I ended up having psycho child from hell. And I'm not saying that in any disrespect, but unless you were there to witness this, it was exactly that. That's the best way to describe it. Psycho child from hell. He went from being very passive and very relaxed to extremely dangerous. To give you an example of what happened, he got really upset with his brother because his brother was teasing him, and this was an ongoing battle between the two boys. But I was on the phone with my cousin. I kind of could hear some commotion going on. Now, in the beginning, before I was on the phone with my cousin, I put a video in for the boys to watch. They had had their lunch, and I thought, okay, it's quiet. They're watching the video. I'm going to go ahead and call my cousin back, as she had called. And I really didn't think too much harm could come out of this, because usually when the Ritalin does start to wear off, it wears off gradually. It doesn't just wear off. Oh, gosh. I was on the phone for 5 minutes and I started hearing a commotion, and I thought, uh-oh, my oldest is putting my youngest through something, because I could hear my youngest son screaming. And I told my cousin, I said, listen, I might have to get off the phone because something is going on, but just a minute. I put the phone down and I went into the family room and I said, what is going on in here? And my youngest son, who has this condition, kept telling me, he mean. So I looked at my oldest and I said, you know, you need to be nice to your brother. Don't torture your brother, because that's ultimately what would happen. I went back to the phone and I was telling my cousin, you know, what was happening. And she's like, okay. And I said, so I may have to get off the phone depending on what else is going to happen. We were on the phone for about 5 more minutes and I heard another commotion. The next thing I looked up, there's my son, my youngest son, and he ran into the living room where the phone was, and he grabbed the baseball bat that was next to the front door. Now, I always kept a baseball bat by the front door because we lived out in the country and I wanted some type of weapon just in case I needed it. But my son decided that he was so angry at his brother that he was going to spank him with the baseball bat. That's when I basically just tossed the phone on the ground and went after him because I thought, oh my God, he's going to hit my oldest with that. And sure enough, just as I got there, he had that bat up against his upper shoulder getting ready to swing, and I grabbed it before he did. I got on my knees and I said, wait a minute, what are you doing? And he says, I spank. And his face was just lobster red. He was so angry. And I thought to myself, this is not normal. This is not my son. He does not do this. And it took me, I'm not kidding you, 3 hours to calm him down. And I couldn't figure out what it was. So I asked my oldest boy, I said, what did you do? And he goes, Mom, he says, I didn't do anything. I just was watching TV and all of a sudden he started hitting me. And I said, well, why didn't you say something? He says, well, because you were on the phone. I said, you always talk to me. You don't just not say anything. I said, did you say something to him? He goes, no. He says, I was just watching the show and all of a sudden he started hitting me and I told him to stop. I thought, okay. That was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and his doctor is in the office at that time. So I went ahead, picked up the phone, I called the family doctor and spoke to the nurse, and I said, listen, I'm not giving my son Ritalin anymore. I said, this is getting way out of hand, and I said, the problem is now is that my oldest boy is going to end up getting hurt in the process of all of this. So I said, can you please inform his doctor that I am not going to give my son Ritalin anymore? So she said, well, just a minute. And I think a couple of minutes later, the doctor comes on the line and he goes, what's going on? So I explained to him what just happened. And he said, okay, totally agree. Do not give him that anymore. And he says, why don't you bring your son to the office in a couple of days and we'll talk. And I said, fine. I said, but I am not putting him on medication. He does not need it. He is not hyper. The nice thing about this whole episode was after the Ritalin finally wore off, because it could take up to 48 hours to wear off, my son went back to his normal, peaceful self. I went to school with him once we knew that it had worn off. And I explained to the teachers, because there were 3 of them, I said, listen, I understand that you guys are here to protect these children and to keep them mellow so that they can learn. Totally understand that. However, I cannot put my son on Ritalin anymore, and this is what happened. And I explained it to them. They were like, oh my gosh. And I said, I'm not on Ritalin anymore. So if you guys can't deal with his outbursts, then I guess he's not going to be able to stay in the school. And she said, one of them said, no, listen, let's see how it goes, and then we'll evaluate it, how he reacts to things. I said, fine, that's perfect. I said, but I'm not putting him back on that crap. A week went by, and he still went to the school. And the next week, I got a call from his teacher. She said, can you come in? We'd like to talk to you. And I thought, uh-oh. I said, did David do something? She said, oh, no, we just want to talk to you. And I said, okay. They had explained to me that David's attitude completely changed, that he was very cooperative. He wasn't having any issues. They felt that the Ritalin in some way, even after being taken off of it, calmed him down. And she said, I want to apologize because we really thought that he was ADHD. And she said, that's not the case. He's definitely not hyperactive, because now that he's off, he should have had the same outward symptoms of ADHD. And at this time, he was completely mellow and calm and quiet. She said, I honestly think that he needs to be reevaluated, because she said he shows signs of being autistic. And I thought, okay, we're not going that direction again. Basically, the way I felt is that, my son has already gone through enough evaluations and stuff. We already know that he's somewhat borderline autistic, and we spoke about it for a while, and I explained to her my concerns, and she totally agreed. She thought, you know what, I totally understand that, it's a lot. It is a lot to take in for that child, especially at his age. I said, you know what, let's keep him going in school and see what happens. He was in Head Start for a couple of years, and he did wonderful. He was very happy. He loved going to school and playing with his friends. And they worked very hard to get his motor skills up to snuff, and because he had a hard time. He could not walk, sit up on his own, or crawl until he was almost 2.5 years of age. This school really helped with his motor skills and upper body strength, lower body strength, but he also was going through a lot of different types of subjects too. So it was really good that they spent the time with him, and I was so appreciative of that. Your bonus question: if there was a place that you could go to and money was not driving factor to it, where would you go? Where's your favorite place to go? Now fast forward to his 14th birthday, basically. So he had to go from grade school to secondary school, which is what in the States is called high school. And I was somewhat worried about this, because any type of change, and my son would go into a frenzy. Now, he didn't hit and kick like he did when he was a child, like a small child. But what he did at this point is he would sit and argue with you, or the subject, he wouldn't let it go. He would just constantly dwell on it and worry about it. And you can sit there and try to explain to him, how things were, and, to relax and do all this. And he just, it's like his brain could not accept what I was telling him. So I learned quite quickly that the best thing for him was for him to figure it out on his own. Not for me to tell him that it's going to be this and it's going to be that. He cannot understand what anyone is telling him until he figures it out in his own mind. So when we moved to Canada, he had been put on a list to be evaluated, like a psychological evaluation. And so he was, when we moved to Canada, he was thrusted into grade think it was grade 4, and he was technically in Washington when we moved from Washington to Canada. He was technically in grade 2, so he was put in a higher level than he should have. And I tried to explain to them not to do that, but they were very insistent on putting him in grade 4. So that was a mess, because now we had a AB student that was put in a grade that he should not have gone to, and now I have a child that was getting D's and F's. So again, like I said, the school thought that, you know what, we're going to go ahead and put him on this list for an evaluation to find out why that was. And I tried to explain to them, you know, he was diagnosed with borderline autism, and again, without the proof, there's nothing that can be done about it. At least that's what they told me. Now that went on, see, he was in grade 4, and he went through grade 4 to grade 7 like this. And he was frustrated, he was angry, he was very depressed, and as I said, there was nothing I could do because the school just would not listen to me. So when he went from grade school to secondary school or high school, he was taken off the list. And they basically told me, you know, at this time there's just too many people on this list, or too many students on this list, and because he's now going into secondary school, we're just going to take him off the list, and it's now up to them to have him evaluated. And I thought, really? That's just, to me, I was thinking that's really unfair to the child. You know, how do you do that to a child? You just, oh, I was so upset. Eventually, an organization that would come in to visit us noticed how David would react to certain things. So I'll give you an example. This organization would come in and talk to both boys, and she would ask them about their day, how things were going, you know, in the house, and their friends. I mean, just random questions. And my youngest, his name's David, he would participate in the conversation, and then when it got to the point where it was boring or to him, or he was being asked like a second or third time about something, he would just get up and walk out of the room. So after a while, this lady that came from this organization, she noticed, she'd asked him a question, and he just got up and went under the kitchen table and started talking to our dogs. And she's like, looked at me and she says, "Is that normal?" And I said, "What do you mean, is that normal?" And she goes, "Well, he just got up and went over there." And I said, "Well, yeah, he does that when he gets to the point where he's bored." And she's kind of looked at him for a second, and she said, "Has he ever been evaluated?" And I said, "Oh, don't even take me there." She said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, in grade school, they put him on a list to be evaluated, and it never got done." And she's like, "Oh my God, that is so not good." She left and told me that she was going to give me a call the next day to schedule another visit, and I said, "Sure." She called me the next day, and she says, "You know what? Spoke to the head of our group, and they are going to pay to have David evaluated." And I said, "What?" And she says, "We're going to have David evaluated because," she says, "I saw something that just doesn't make sense." And she said that might answer some of the questions that everybody might have about him. And I said, "Okay, if you guys want to pay for it." Ultimately, I got an appointment, took him to the appointment to see the psychologist. The psychologist sat me down and explained what was going to happen. And he said, "You know, do you live fairly close to here?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I'm about 10 minutes from your office." He said, well, why don't you go ahead and go home? This is going to take about 4 hours, and I'll call you when we're done. And I'm like, sounds great. So I left, and 6 hours passed. And I thought, okay, something's not right here, because he said 4 hours. Finally, just after 6 hours, I got a phone call from the psychologist, and he says, well, you know what, he's ready to go, and thank you for allowing me to spend some extra time with him. I'm really sorry that I didn't call you sooner, but I just felt it was best, and I'll explain to you what happened, and maybe be able to give you some answers. I'm like, oh, this is great. I said, okay, I'll be there in about 10 minutes. So when I did get there, the psychologist sat me down, and he said, again, I'm really sorry for the amount of time and not calling you and preparing you for that. But he said, you know, I started doing the evaluation and found that your son is displaying 2 different types of symptoms, and I felt that it was necessary to do both a psychological evaluation on top of an educational evaluation. And he said this way it would tell me exactly where he was. And I thought, okay. So he shows me this picture that my son drew, and he goes, you notice anything different about this picture? And the picture was the house with our car in front of it. There was 3 people in the picture. I really didn't notice anything other than the faces that he drew had eyes and it had a nose, but it had no mouth. He said, this picture tells me a lot about your son. And I said, okay, I guess. What does it tell you? And he goes, well, he said, not one of you have a mouth. And I said, okay. He goes, that means in him, there's no expression. There's no voice. There's no understanding. And I said, I'm confused. And he says, this is a typical picture that an autistic child would draw, even at his age. And he said, notice that they're stick people. Showed him that my son was autistic. He said, basically, we went through the evaluation, and he said, there is a fairly big spectrum between autism and Asperger. Now, I have to be honest, I have never heard the term Asperger before until this meeting. He said, so basically autism is on one side of the spectrum and Asperger is on the opposite side of the spectrum. Your son basically close to the center of autism and Asperger. He said, so that basically tells me that he is what we call a high functioning autistic. He's reachable, he can learn, and he can understand how his brain interprets the information that he's getting or receiving. He said most autistics have a very difficult time expressing themselves. He said, so that explains the stick people, why they do not have a mouth. Now, again, for me, I wouldn't have known that, because that's not something that, you know, this type of awareness is just not out there. And so I kept listening to him. And he said, so basically what I'm telling you is that your son is a high functioning autistic. Now, he said, your son also shows strong signs of what we call Asperger. He says, have you ever heard of Asperger? And I said, no, I have not a clue what that is. In fact, I was in tears because I thought I've never heard of it before. And he said, well, Asperger is the opposite side of the spectrum. So basically, this is the type of person that would not be able to multitask. They have to be able to finish the project or the assignment. They cannot just change things. He said, so that is one of the reasons why he would lash out, because he would be asked to do something, and then if he didn't get it completed, he would be asked to walk away from it. And he says, your son cannot do that. He just can't. So at this point, I'm beside myself, because what he was telling me was exactly what my son would do. So, they went ahead and recommended a lot of programs to put him in to help him through school. Unfortunately, it was a lot of money, and at the time, because I was a single parent raising 2 kids, I couldn't afford to do that. So I made a decision to send him down to the States where his dad lived, and have him in a school out there that was designed to help children like him in public schools, and it didn't cost money. So it was totally free to a student in the student's family, as long as the child was evaluated. So because of the evaluation, he was able to go to that school, and so he ended up living with his father for about 2 years. He graduated from high school with honors, so he graduated with a B level, and I couldn't be more proud of him. He is just an inspiration when it came to that. Very smart. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is a couple of reasons. One, I don't know if any of you guys watch America's Got Talent, but there is a contestant on there that is phenomenal, and he is autistic and blind, and holy smokes, is he ever phenomenal. Just amazing. So if you haven't had a chance, look up Cody Lee on YouTube, and it'll bring it up, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. And your second bonus question: what is your favorite type of food? For example, is it Italian, Mexican, or just plain old American food? Let me know. I'd like to know. So by saying that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the video, and I hope that this brings a little bit of understanding. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Please do not forget to put your answers down below in the comments so that we can get you all registered for those free giveaways. So by saying that, if you like the video, do give it that thumbs up. That indicates to me that I'm on the right track with the information that I am sharing with you. Also too, if you didn't like the video, it's okay, totally understand, but if you can let me know down below what you didn't like about the video, that way it helps me improve my videos for the future. If you're new to the channel and you like what you see and you like what you hear, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you join the family. But don't forget to hit the bell, because the bell will indicate when I've uploaded my next video. So everyone, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk again real soon.